Hello there, friends. Andrea with the Bangs here, and of the She Wonders Why podcast. Today is a special episode, another special episode of not one, not two, but three people, including me. It is another triple person discussion because I just love them and all the technical issues that come along with it. So these fellas I'm talking to today are called Chris and Matt, although you may know Matt as Arthur Dent on Twitter. So they are the hosts of the podcast Decoding the Gurus. It is the kind of podcast that wants to look at certain figures that have gathered a following in the past few years. And they have 3 episodes up at this point. I highly recommend it. I binged them. They were awesome. They're very long, but worth the listen. So this discussion was phenomenal. I love talking with these guys because they feed off of each other so well. They're so funny. Like, I had trouble keeping in the giggles. But they're also amazingly smart and really, really good at what they do, which is analyzing arguments. Well, they have other day jobs, but for the purposes of the podcast, they focus on analyzing the arguments of these gurus and if they hold up. We also talk quite a bit for the last half about Jordan Peterson, which was such a delight because he's my favorite guru of all of the people they've talked about. And so if you're really into this Peterson stuff, I guess go about halfway and listen from there. But really listen to the whole thing. It was excellent. Excellent talk. So I'm going to stop talking actually and let you guys get to the main event. And listen to their podcast. It's amazing. You won't be sorry. And please, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please don't forget to. Also, listen to my podcast because there is one and it exists. Without further ado, here are the guys. Hello, fellas from Twitter.
Hello, Andrea. Nice
Hello,
to meet you.
Andrea.
So, we'll start with introducing the names. Okay, so we'll start with the one I know for sure. So Chris Kavanaugh. And what do you do, sir, for our audience
What do I do?
who doesn't know?
I'm an academic, and I in cognitive anthropology / psychology. So
It seems like you haven't
really-
talked about it in a while. You're like, what do I do
well,
again?
no, this is generally my confused face about what I do.
What do I
I've
do
had
again?
like years to practice this, and I don't have a good spiel. Yeah.
Okay. You're like, it's always difficult to explain. Okay, well, that's good enough for this show.
Yeah, it's not just you.
Okay.
It's just my general level of like inability to elucidate what I do.
Oh, okay, well, that was a
So-
great word you just used, so we'll just elucidate with that. Okay, so over here to Matt, but maybe Arthur, but maybe actually Matt. So maybe I'll let you explain that.
Yeah. So Matt Brown is my real name. I'm a professor in Australia at university. I'm a psychologist and a researcher mainly. But unfortunately, I'm doing a lot of marking at the moment, which is a complete injustice, I feel. You're right. On the internet, I've been going by the name of Arthur Dent. He's my alter ego.
Who's the
and
guy
I
in your
just
Twitter
used
profile?
So he's the actor from the BBC TV series, the original TV series of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So that's Arthur
Oh.
Dent, the character.
That's actually his name. Okay, funny.
So he travels around the galaxy, being very uncomfortable and confused and grumpy,
And
with a towel.
Is that you?
It is pretty much me. That's pretty much my life. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, you guys. Okay, so I'm having you on this my podcast, my YouTube channel, because we have visuals that are like, who knows how the visuals are gonna go, you guys, but we'll see. Your podcast, your new podcast, you have 3 episodes up, and I listened to all of them, so you can be
God bless you.
I listened to, I binged them, and I actually was a little sad
Really?
when there were no more. Yeah.
Oh,
I
that's
told you, Chris,
that's the opposite reaction I thought we were going to get there. Like, and I don't know how I can actually handle the hear your voice after that.
No,
But
you guys,
yeah.
I actually I found your little camaraderie like really charming, and you could tell you guys are like, we're buddies.
Oh, we should record. We need to record this and send it out to all the haters, all the people.
Okay.
This is great. Thank you so much.
Oh no, well I'm known as like a peacemaker on Twitter, and like the
Yeah.
best I can. So
That's also good to know, because actually, like behind the scenes, me and Matt hate each other viscerally. So you
Yeah,
know, all
that's
the
the
buddy
irony.
buddy stuff. That's just like
Okay,
a kind of
okay, but like,
complete bitch.
No, I was just gonna say, if Chris would just drop that legal action, I'm sure our relationship would improve. But you know,
you guys are
it's on
gonna make
him.
me laugh the whole time. Okay, so here's how I know you're good. Because like, so my husband was in here helping me figure out all the technical stuff, but he doesn't follow any of this stuff at all. Like, I'm very much in the Twitterverse and know what's going on with all the different acronyms of, you know, IDW and I don't know, whatever other acronyms are out there, the wokesters and whatever. I was listening to the one about Jim Lindsay and the Jurassic Park situation, and he quite laughed actually quite a bit at he chuckled. That was quite a bit from my perspective, but he chuckled at like when you were making the important correction about Jeff Goldblum and his fate in Jurassic Park, and so that's how you know it's good, because you got a positive reaction from my husband who's not into this at all.
A normal person actually chuckled. That is something I think we could put on the tagline. Normal people may chuckle occasionally at non-online lines.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're definitely aware that our topics are incredibly niche and probably make sense to only people who are pathologically online,
Yes.
and we're okay with that.
Well, that's what it's for, and that's for people like me, because I knew 100% all of the things, and that's one of the reasons why. Because actually, I remember we talked about the Nobel Prize episode, Chris. You and I in the last chat we had, and I didn't actually know what you were saying, because you said nobles, and I was like, what's noble? Oh, Nobels. Oh. Sorry, maybe the Irish accent got in there, and I didn't follow.
No, I was talking about the Nobel. The Nobel Prize is completely separate, separate thing from Nobel.
Yeah, no.
I didn't even know I was pronouncing that wrong until today. So this is.
I thought that's just how they pronounce it in Ireland.
Traumatic experience for me.
You were frustrated.
I think with his Northern Irish accent, he pronounces everything wrong, so it's hard to tell. I don't know how you can tell.
Just blame that.
It sounds like I'm saying Nobels, but like, so what? It's not Nobel.
It is Nobel Peace Prize.
Okay.
Man, what if am I?
But I said,
should I keep
what
this
I
in,
say.
you guys? Like, we need to know, like, the pronunciation. Okay.
Yeah, we need to Google this.
Well, okay, you guys can look it up if you
Andrea, that episode, you know, about the Weinstein.
Steins.
Steins.
It's Weinstein.
No, isn't it?
No, I actually was gonna give a correction.
Tried to do it the other way.
No, I was gonna write in a correction, but I was like, nah, I'll just be talking to them. It's Stein, like Einstein.
Einstein. Yeah, Weinstein. Yeah, Weinstein. Weinstein.
It's not
Weinstein.
like Harvey
okay.
Weinstein.
Yeah, I actually
like
tried to correct it again.
So you talked about that with me, and so it's interesting that you chose that particular episode for your first episode, because clearly it's been eating at you for a while.
Yeah.
but okay. So the thing is, I find it interesting the way you set up your podcast, because you're not saying whether you think it is a good argument personally, or whether you think that the person or the people are great, or your fans or not fans. You're like, how strong is their argument? And then you go through it and have them speak for themselves. So how did you decide to like do this format?
Chris, would you like to handle that one?
Yeah. So I think I would say that I think it's fairly obvious with most of the people where me and Matt land on their their arguments, yes, but also the broader context. Like I think it's impossible for that not to seep in somewhat, like
Well, when
when
you like
you're
laugh
addressing
at
things.
the things being said, like like kind of in a ridiculing manner, I kind of got that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, because so just like, but setting that aside in terms of like why we went with that format, it was kind of two things, and Matt can correct me if I'm making this up, but like one was that we seen people like addressing this kind of material, and a lot of it was coming from a place of uh, that the people who tend to pay attention to it tend to really hate the people involved or politically strongly disagree with them, usually because they're on the far left. And to me, the criticisms got a bit mixed in that like they're half critiquing them from the position of like a leftist. But I don't think that the criticism relies, it's a different set of criticisms, leftist criticisms from just looking at someone's argument, not because your politics like strongly diverge from them. And then the other thing is that there's like endless accusations of kind of bad faith, and that you didn't pay attention to their argument, or you're just attacking their character. So it kind of felt like we want to avoid that, and that we wanted to be able to deal with people, not just like, not to be a podcast where it's like, here's our list of people we don't like and grievances,
Right.
but that we can look at people we like, people we don't like, people that we don't know, and kind of give us more range to, explore things. And not, we were like, although the Weinsteins for the initial episode, we were quite conscious that don't want it to be, a podcast about our personal grievances.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Arthur, thoughts? Ah! No, Matt!
Yeah.
Oh my god! Why do you...
I know,
you...
Arthur is fine, honestly. I'm happy
I
with
feel
that.
like so
You did it to
ridiculous,
yourself,
Matt.
Matt. You did this.
Yeah, I did it to
Oh my
myself.
gosh, but
I
like
can't
most
complain.
people aren't like as ridiculous as I am in my reaction, so I apologize for the scream.
No, that's okay.
Anyway, okay, so
Look,
what were you saying, Matt? Sorry.
Okay. I was just gonna say, yeah, I think Chris's summary is really good. We like, there's a lot of haters out there, a lot of people who got political objections to these various figures, but that's pretty boring, really. To
Why we
to
hate the
just take it.
Weinsteins, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to, and the other thing about these gurus is that they generally all sound really good, as opposed to being Chris. But they come across really well, and if you don't listen carefully and pay attention to their arguments and just let it sort of wash over you, it's pretty convincing. So I suspect that a lot of people do consume their content a bit like that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we thought it would be interesting to actually take them seriously and pay very close attention to what they were saying, and see whether it made sense from our kind of, nerdy, academic-y kind of viewpoint.
So where did you guys come up with the name Decoding the Gurus?
I think it was me. I'm going to take full credit for that
Okay.
one. Chris is terrible at naming things. There's a couple of things he's really bad at. One of them is naming things. The other one is ending conversation.
Is that why there's always that awkward bye?
Yes. It's because of Chris.
Okay.
That's I think that's more a skit. That's not a reflection of my inability to
Okay,
say
so
to end
wait, so
conversations
for those
naturally.
who haven't heard, how do the bye, Chris?
It's a normal like goodbye,
Okay.
like that.
Goodbye. Like I
No,
imagine it like
Oh,
yeah.
bye.
That's not, maybe not quite as feminine as you,
Okay, I
or
put my own
it could
spin
be,
on it.
but
I admit. Sorry. Okay, we've gone off the rails again. Okay, over to Matt. Matt? How did you come up with the name?
Oh well, let's see. We started off with a bit of a list of people, I suppose, and we haven't covered most of them in the podcast yet. But and we're trying to figure out what they had in common, because it felt like they did have something in common in the way they kind of presented themselves as having a kind of like they were challenging mainstream ways of thought, usually challenging academic standard orthodox academic points of view, and they purportedly provide like a fresh new insights that you're not going to get from conventional sources. And it struck us that they sounded a lot like these new age gurus, the people like Deepak Chopra, who providing people with a deep sense of meaning and a deep sense of how the world really works and how to really understand what's going on. And it struck us that these guys were different because they weren't really religious or spiritual figures primarily. They very much presented themselves as secular intellectuals, and that was the basis of it. So we thought, okay, we're going to look at these gurus, and then we thought, well, let's decode them. Just sounds fun. So that's our thing now. That's what we're doing.
There was a back and forth via Twitter DMs or emails or like some digital communication about what the appropriate verb was for the
Like, what are we doing?
And
like
Matt's,
teasing out the arguments of the gurus? No.
Yeah, and like I'm sure there were ones that were much more insulting, or ones that were also just like academic-y and weird. So this was like the least weird of them, and probably the one that I didn't pick. So that's possibly it.
Okay, what else have you tried to name that's so bad? Like, why is it a trend, Matt, that you're saying for Chris? You're like, he's very bad at naming things, and then like, well, how do you know it could just be this one thing?
No. Look, this is just my personal opinion. So, got to put the disclaimers, Weinstein style. But I think Chris's names for the podcast are terrible, but I don't know. He named the last episode and it seemed all right.
What was
maybe he's getting
what was
better.
the last one called? I know it's Jordan Peterson, but what was it called? You've only had 3. Come on.
It was called The Alchemical Lemon Explains the Crystalline Structure of Logos, which is accurate.
Oh, is that? Oh, okay. That was the Peterson one? Okay, I don't remember reading that.
Yeah,
that name.
That's the subtitle. The actual title is, just Jordan Peterson : The Alchemical Lemon Explains the Crystalline Structure of Logos. And was
that a quote?
That was intentionally wordy.
Because that's how he talks.
That's not my usual way to make.
So, okay, I know you've only done 3 of them, but, or maybe you've done more. And also, just so you know, feedback-wise, I couldn't tell that you were filming them the same episode at different times. I remember you saying, I don't know if it feels like it's different moods. It was always the same little snappy, little back and forth.
It felt most notable on the first episode because that was stitched together from a lot of conversations.
It was 3 hours, though.
Yeah, but the other ones we've kind of mainly done them in two sessions. So we set up the break in advance. So like we finish at a point and then we like pick up from that point. So we're getting better at it.
So okay, favorite. I think that one of you, I can't remember which one, said that the Peterson one was your favorite episode. Is that because you're just getting used to it, or is that because you thought it was fun to go through Peterson stuff?
Yeah. I think the Peterson episode was fun. I think the first one on Eric and Brett was, I think, a good episode, but in a way, it was exhausting because we had to pick apart basically a lot of what turns out to be pretty bad factual claims, really, I think. But the Peterson one is this sort of airy-fairy theology stuff, which, I'm not a theology guy, but it was fun to talk about, and it was fun to think about. Yeah.
Chris, did you have favorite so far?
Yeah. So similar to Matt, like I enjoyed Peterson, the Jordan Peterson episode, because I like, as much as I find it frustrating to try and work out what he's saying at some points, like when you sit down and try to work out like what's his argument here, that's stressful. If you just listen to him, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, right.
entertaining.
But for the actual episode, it was like, oh, okay, now we have to.
Yeah, what's the connection between this point to this point? That's like more annoying, but in a kind of amusing way, because there's funny things that he says and whatnot, or the way he connects things. But the Eric and Brett episode was very enjoyable for me to like. Not
cathartic. Was it cathartic for you?
Yeah. Cathartic. It was just like, I want to get that information
into
like
the world.
Out, so that because that was like, it should have been out in a written form in an article like months earlier, and I just couldn't get around it with my workload, so it felt like good, like this is the points I want to get out about this, and like it's out of my system.
Yes.
So Andrea, you can see the real motivation for the podcast, which is that Chris has been he's been constrained by 280 character limit in Twitter. There's a lot of stuff he wants to.
Well, but it is good, and it's faster than writing and having to edit and like peer review or whatever. I don't know the kind of article you'd be writing if you'd been having it be done peer review. But speaking of peer review, actually, that does make me think about the episode with Eric and Brett, because you guys are talking from a place of knowing, and I'm listening from a place of not knowing. And even after we talked about it, Chris, I didn't quite understand why it wasn't, oh, she stole the idea. She still stole the idea, though. Like, I didn't quite understand that, but the way you guys, like, really teased it out, like, a lot, like, you really did, like, 3 hours. Like, you're, like, it was still, I remember even halfway being like, but why could she just take the idea? Like, even it wasn't clear, like, halfway through, for me, a lay person. But by the end, I think it was, especially when you're like her 20-year career in this particular like field or whatever. So yeah, anyways, it was helpful.
I think that's. Oh, sorry, Matt, go ahead.
Sorry, I'll just say, I think that's one of the interesting things about that one, which is that I think most people, and this is true of many PhD students and early career researchers, is that they do fetishize ideas a little bit too much, and they think that they have this kind of tangible value. And one thing you learn, having done it for a while, is that ideas are a dime a dozen. Like, everyone's got ideas, and at any particular point in time, the same ideas are occurring to different people, and they're being talked about and shared around, and people have this tendency to kind of appropriate them and go, well, I thought of that, so I kind of own it now. And I'm sure it seems a little bit counterintuitive, but really what you do learn working in it is that the ideas don't really count. What counts is doing the work, gathering the data, writing it up, and really following through on the idea.
Okay, yeah. You see, even that helps to understand. Yeah.
And I think it's probably most stark in the Eric and Brett episode, because Matt and I are familiar with like peer review systems and all those and journals and that kind of thing. But in general, I think that there's no pretense on our part that we're not coming from the position of two academics, but it feels a little bit like in the culture war, academics are only represented as like one of two things. One is that they're like the uber defenders of wokedom. They're critical race theory advocates, and they want to decolonize math and blah, blah, blah. Or they're heterodox, like Lee Jusum types who are writing for Quillette and want to like expose the sham that is academia, and that's the two.
I know,
like,
and you fall
online
into that little bitty in between that people don't know.
But so yeah, this is the thing. I don't think the part that me and Matt are in is the little itty part. I think it's the little itty bit online, but it's the massive center for normal academics. Like most academics are not uber woke and
Uber
they're not
heterodox.
like yeah, they're just
no. Look, yeah, I mean, we look. It feels like the main message here is that we're normal. We're normal. We really are. But seriously,
no.
Most academics really are just doing their job, you know, and producing stuff and don't care about the stuff that the academics who are very loud on Twitter care about.
They just want to teach their students.
And yeah, I don't think that the academic perspective like requires that you end up falling into either of those camps. So like caring about research, caring about the extent to which you're using rhetoric or the extent to which you're, you know, implying that there's grand conspiracies, all of that doesn't matter really where you fall on the woke spectrum. And like part of my frustration is that it feels people's critical sense is only ever applied in the direction of the people that they see, you know, falling into either camp. Like critical theorists, they're the problem. So let's like make fun of Candy, but like James Lindsay's Twitter feed, well, that's fine. That's the acceptable cost for dealing with these kind of people. But it feels like no, like you could be like concerned about, you know, critical theory or have reservations and yet not require that you say, well, you know, James Lindsay is the best advocate we have for why the problem exists. Like I don't see why you have to fall into those
either camps.
So the like horrific centrist lament.
You know, I'll play a little tiny violin in the background. No,
good on both sides.
Yeah.
Good people on both sides.
We're trying to make milquetoast both sides of the school again.
No, but that's actually, I think, one of the reasons why I had Chris on originally. The one time I had him, the one time I had you on before, Chris. But that's why I also wanted to talk with you guys, because I think this. I mean, I hope that your podcast gets really big and gets traction, because I think it's very useful. But the thing is, and this came out in your talk about James Lindsay. Actually, I do need to plug that I did speak with Jim about his Twitter persona. I don't know if you guys caught that. I mean, I'm not going to go assuming, but if you're interested, that's there. And also audience, that's there if you're wanting to hear his reasons for why he's the way he is on Twitter. I asked him.
Yeah, good.
Well, you know, we're actually like friends on Twitter. Like I was friends with him before he got really, really big. So I got to see like Jim on Twitter. Anyway, but yeah. But oh no, my shameless plug, and now I'm lost. Where was I going? I think about why. Okay, why did I bring up Jim? Shoot. Oh, we're talking about you guys in the James Lindsay interview. You mentioned about how the things that are reducible to be simple foes to fight against, that's what people are drawn to. But it's actually not simple, and it's actually rather complex. Many of these things, and not to say that some things aren't simple. I think that sometimes there are some causes that people can rally around that are like simply like, oh, we mustn't, like, you know, like slavery, like we want slavery to stop. That's kind of simple, you know?
That's
okay. Well, I'm just trying to find something that's like universally like, no, we don't want slavery. Okay.
No.
Okay. I'm just
to be clear. That podcast.
Okay. So okay, we're all in agreement. Yeah, slavery bad. Okay. Anyway, so I don't want to say that they're not things in general that can be simple, but the things that are being talked about, you guys were mentioning in your second episode, is they are rather complex. but that's not something that people want to rally around. It's not easy to rally around the complex issue. And so that's why I'm like, oh, I hope your podcast gets big if people want to have complexity put in their lives. But I do. Maybe there are more people like me out there who are like, wait, what should I think about this? Because I'm having trouble from what I'm seeing on both sides.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting points about, many things are super complex. On the other hand, all of the complexity can sometimes obfuscate some very basic things that are right or wrong, right? So I haven't really figured that one out. But one thing that I think is true is what you said at the beginning, which is that people are drawn to a Manichaean worldview where the bad guys are over there. They want to destroy civilization and or enslave everybody and be Nazis or whatever. So we need to fight those guys and get them. They're all terrible people. And if you actually talk to people who are, putting aside James, I don't want to comment on him particularly, but the vast majority of people who have concerns about critical theory and social justice are not like crazy right-wing Nazis. On the other hand, the vast majority of people who are very pro social justice do not want to destroy Western civilization either. So if you start from that basis, then you might have a shot at figuring out some of the points you agree and disagree on.
Okay, Chris, do you have comments on that?
I was just going to say that Matt made a point previously on some episode that if you want to rally people behind a cause, like for political or other activist goals, the message of, well, it's complicated is not a great selling point. So it's better if you say this is a threat to the very civilization that we depend on and freedom of speech and so on. So in some respects, it's completely understandable that people would gravitate towards those kind of messages, and that it would be less popular in general to kind of say, well, hold on. But I think that's the difference between if you are trying to do activism and if you're trying to look at something critically or I'm not going to say objectively, but more objectively, So activists are going to do what activists do. But if you're not approaching things as an activist, I don't think you have to buy into those kind of simplifying discourses. But it's completely understandable why people do if they have a cause that they want to promote. So it's like that with a lot of the things that we talk about, that it isn't some mystery to me why people like Jordan Peterson or why people find James Lindsay convincing or why they like the Weinstein's narrative about their suppression. But it doesn't mean it isn't worth challenging those things. The appeal is real.
Okay,
though.
So that brings me to this question I actually wanted to ask you at some point. Why the rise of the gurus now in this time?
That's a good question too. We've talked about this and I don't think we're super sure. There's some ideas floating around that people kind of need these totalizing narratives. They need to have some kind of ineffable meaning projected onto their lives. And the argument goes that traditional religions and belief systems that were all about metaphysical things supplied that before, and in the last however many decades or 100 years, they've been on the decline. And people, the argument goes that people are looking for substitutes for that, for somebody to supply it. And because kind of having being a guru like Deepak Chopra has kind of limited appeal because most people do not buy straight up magic, then more complicated narratives might be fitting the bill. Now, I don't know if I buy that completely, but that's one explanation. But the short answer is I'm not really sure. What do you think, Chris?
I think this that that definitely factors in, and then the rise of like social media and like technology platforms, and people can reach big audiences through YouTube or through Twitter or through their own website. So like I think that, and people can seek out communities of quite niche topics, like which
Like
is
this.
part of like how all of us
Yeah.
like exist. Like it has good and bad sides. It has good and bad sides, but yeah, I think that environment is new to a certain extent, and it
Yeah.
gives a space that that allows 1,000 gurus to flourish.
To
So
To
bloom. Yeah.
bloom.
Yeah. Look, and I think yeah, well, that's the Chinese
Oh.
proverb that let 1,000 flowers bloom. I think was the Cultural
Oh,
Revolution or
man.
something. But yeah, actually, Chris, I totally agree. And the other aspect to it, I guess, is this recent trend towards delegitimizing conventional sources of authority
Oh,
and
what's that
institutions.
about?
So well, yeah, I'm sure
Mhm.
you're aware of it. There's this huge trend towards less
Is it fake
trust
news? Is
in
that's
traditional.
the spirit of this?
part of it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's certainly part of it. But so there's the fake news, but then there's less trust in academia. There's less trust in medicine and in science generally, and it's coming from
In
all
journalism.
directions. And journalism, just in general, there is less trust in authority figures. So that provides more scope and space for people to present themselves as an alternative
Okay,
authority
well, that
source.
then leads to the
Yeah.
question, why are people trusting authority figures less?
Although that I'd probably caveat that they are like, if you take Trump as an authority figure, there's a hell of a lot of people that even though they acknowledge that he's a liar, they kind of trust him to
Yeah.
be
So,
in the
yeah.
truth.
Well, I probably should have said institutions rather than figures.
Yeah.
So people are distrusting institutions more and then putting their faith into, it could be Jordan Peterson, could be Donald Trump, could be some other kind of cult of personality type scenario. Now, your question, Andrew, was
why are they not trusting the
though?
institutions? Yeah, what did they do to lose their trust? Weapons of mass destruction? Is that it?
It's part of what. Well, yeah, like that's part of it. I think it's Chris sort of mentioned it before, which was the social media, the sort of so much information, and the information isn't filtered through conventional journalism and editorial things and whatever. So there are many more opportunities for basically experts to be proven wrong, and experts are wrong, of course, quite often, but perhaps people are overreacting to that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you were probably right, Andrea, that the Iraq War did a lot to erode institutional trust, at least in the US and UK, right? When weapons of mass destruction were known forthcoming. But I mean, the anti-vaccine movement and all of the skepticism about science or modern medicine has been a pretty consistent feature, but it seems to have been enabled to spread better because of technology, right? I'm not 100% sure I buy my own argument, because I think there was very strong institutional distrust in the 70s and so on, but if you take it as the last 50 years, I would say maybe a strong dissatisfaction with neoliberalism as a system of government has grown, at least in Western countries. And Trump and stuff is a symptom of that, maybe.
Right.
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously, there's been that kind of counter-institutional counterculture movement since the '60s. But when you're talking about anti-vax ideas, just as an example, but it's a good example because a lot of them are like this, then things like Facebook just provided this huge shot in the arm.
Oh, yeah.
Those sorts of ideas have been floating around for ages. But before, in order to gather people, recruit people to those communities, you had to literally
handing out pamphlets.
pamphlets. when you think of for instance like a mother's message board, and then it just starts getting infiltrated, if you like, by it only
Right.
takes one or two by the memes and the so-called evidence, and most people are pretty casual. They're logging on to Facebook, for instance. They're not setting out to do hardcore research or anything like that. And it's very convincing. It's not surprising at all that people would be convinced by the disinformation that is flowing through those digital channels.
So, okay, I do want to speak to you guys because this is going a little bit outside of the podcast space. But no, this is why you're doing this. Okay, so I think that you kind of alluded to it or mentioned to it about these two different camps and online, and then you're like, but many academics are actually like everything else, but they're just not online. But when you're online and you're seeing what's being said about people, the anti, there's the SJWs and the anti-SJWs, and like there's there's all these different narratives being told to you, and I even have gone into try to understand critical race theory by doing a letter with Liam, Kofi, Bright, back and forth, and we won for the most impossible conversation, and I'm still confused. That's the thing.
That I blame Liam. That's Liam's fault. That's
No!
100% Liam.
Liam was so articulate. No, that's
obscure.
it's me. I'm the novice who doesn't know. No, it's because, and I mean, I know he said like this is not meant to be a worldview. You know, like he said that when I interviewed him after we finished our letter discussion. I interviewed him and he's like, this is not supposed to be an all-encompassing meta-narrative. It's critical race theory. It's theory. It's not meant to be to live your life by. But then you see a curriculum in Portland or Washington picking up about a book about whiteness that's supposed to be read to elementary age school kids. And it's like, but we're being led to believe it's all that. It's all the same. And I understand that not Robin DiAngelo isn't the entire breadth of critical race theory. It felt like that. And I think that's one of the things that has helped me to understand they're not all exactly the same, like 3 or 4 names I've been hearing thrown around. But I'm trying to understand, and I just need a little help to tease through who's right.
Okay, so I think one thing that's helpful for me anyway is to always keep in mind that whatever the topic is, there's this big spectrum of communications around it, and this is true of critical theory, of course, where you have extremely clever and extremely reasonable people like Liam or Aaron Rabinowitz, who does Embrace the Void pod, who I like very much as well, and extremely good framings of it, and then of course you have the spectrum, and you can find stuff at the other extreme, which both of them would dismiss as stupid. Now, this is true of pretty much everything. So to take a completely different example, another hot topic on Twitter sometimes is evolutionary psychology. So I was just commenting earlier today that suffers from exactly the same problem. If you use Twitter and you read posts that are about evolutionary psych, you will see generally the most ridiculous stuff. The really hot takes. If a woman's wearing lipstick, then if a woman's wearing lipstick, then she's signaling her fertility, and all this stuff.
Good thing I opted out of the lipstick today.
we would have taken it. We would have taken it. Clear signal.
But holding a cup, Andrea, you have no idea what that's signaling. Just
don't
cup holding.
I'm not gonna drink the rest of the time. Okay.
There are many people who hate evolutionary psych with the same passion that people hate critical theory.
Yes, I've seen that. I've seen people hate evolutionary psych. Yeah.
Absolutely hate it, and it's for good reason, because what they see is terrible. And that confused me at first, because I didn't know any of this when I first came to Twitter. All I knew was what was in my various textbooks and the extremely reasonable stuff that informs some research that I do. And so it was like this big disconnect. And I've noticed in talking to some people who are very sympathetic to critical theory that they have the same frustration, that they say, look, you're talking about this stuff that is in culture wars and gets a lot of press and is hot topics on Twitter. But my view of this topic is a very different thing. So people are talking past each other because they're actually talking about two different things.
I also am constantly like, Twitter or the online sphere in general is a great system for like presenting you with stuff that will annoy you or that which is outrageous. Like, and a lot of the material that you see, Andrea, and probably, are concerned about or find what, like that's a book for, preschool people about
Whiteness?
like, that
Yeah.
this, I haven't seen this, but like, some book about anal sex for nursery school children
gosh.
would be a concern for me, right? But I can imagine something that exists somewhere in the world that is like that. But I'm always, whenever I see those things, I'm always wondering how much of this is like, if I go to a random nursery school in America, there will be like all these books that are being shown and all these trainings everyone's attending, or are these like the selected worst, most extreme examples that, maybe there's one of those books in the library, but there's like $400 books that, it doesn't. And so I'm not saying that it doesn't make it an issue still, but I feel like people are quite bad about putting that in context, because whenever you ask them how common is this, or how, you always get the same anecdotes, you always get evergreen, you always get the reference to Rochelle Gutierrez or something, some maths educator who's argued that we need to decolonize maths or whatever. But in those cases, my general question is like, are those the people deciding the curriculum for like 5 states or 10 states or all the states, or is this just someone in a school somewhere in America with an opinion or with their own specific curriculum? And that's like, I can't get animated about that to the same extent. And it feels like people are very rarely taking the time to distinguish that. They're just, it's like battling with cherry-picked examples, rather than people taking the time to dig into exactly how spread is this, exactly how much of a problem is it? Is it a bigger problem than, the other issues which could take up time? I'm not saying that, whatever people want to choose their time on focusing on, that's fine. But I think you still should be able to keep your specific focus in perspective in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. Have a sense of proportion, in other words.
Yeah.
Have a sense of proportion.
Talk about whatever you want to talk about, fixate on whatever topics I do, but I never claim that the things that I'm interested in are the most important things in the world, right? That we all need to care about constantly.
Well, I do have a follow-up though, because until COVID hit and then the riots, as a response to like the murder of George Floyd, I would have been like, yeah, totally. But then things got out of hand, and Robin DiAngelo's on Jimmy Fallon, and people are forming safe space. The white kids are standing like in a center, like circle around the black kids, and they're like, no, you can't come past here. Only people of color past here. And like, again, I know it's cherry picked, but like that did happen, and now people are a little bit more like, okay, this is getting whipped up, across the country because of being indoors all the time. Anyway.
Yeah, I would. So one thing I want to like always be clear is that I'm not someone who's ever argued like this is only a thing that exists on campuses, and like it doesn't, like it might sound at some points like when we were talking about, general academics aren't dealing with the kind of woke heterodox debates every day. That's true, but it isn't the case that these debates and the topics and the different like and critical theory style approaches are having no impact on society and are not influencing social discourse. They clearly are from exactly from the kind of things that you're talking about. And yeah, I guess my view on that is not to say that there aren't issues about that, and we shouldn't be concerned or discussing them, or are is segregation being supported by kind of left-wing ideologies an issue? Like, my answer would be yes, yes, that is an issue where that's promoted. But I still like, it comes back to the point where you end up being presented with this just binary choice that the only positions on those two topics are the extreme woke version, which is advocating for like race specific spaces, or like any of the kind of examples that you're talking about, or the like extremely critical, the one that would lead to kind of putting it as anti-American to have like critical race invoked in your training sessions. And neither of those feel like a solution to me. They just feel like they're the mechanism feeding into each other and like running off the rails in opposite directions. But I think that's an issue, like political polarization and partisanship, and the rise of like extreme ideologies. But I don't think the solution is to like adopt the polar opposite view, and that's what I see a lot of.
Yes.
So yeah, like just I agree with Chris. We wouldn't be saying that the things that someone like James might be concerned about are complete non-issues and complete fabrications, and that it's only the these cherry-picked extreme kind of examples. It's a big world. There are a lot of people living in it, though. Very strange things happen at the margins. At the same time, there's a lot more stuff that is more prevalent, which is perhaps less extreme. And there's genuine conversations to be had about what kind of values and what kind of things should be done in terms of policy happening at that more moderate end. So I think we have a research project at the moment where we're looking at left-wing thought and sort of breaking it down into not just treating it as a monolith, but actually acknowledging that there are different streams, from a kind of a progressive liberal kind of stream, a socialist materialist kind of stream, and also a kind of social justice type stream as well. And they have legitimate differences of opinion, and relatively mainstream policies sometimes reflect that those differences, even within the left. But the extreme stuff, the stuff that sort of gets people angry on Twitter, I would argue doesn't tend to be very prevalent. I mean, the things that have been happening in the US recently obviously are a big deal. So that's a bit of an exception to what I'm saying. A lot of stuff is going on there. But if you take an example, for instance, my university has a policy that all units that are taught will incorporate some element of Indigenous perspectives in the content and in what's taught. Okay, so that's a pretty social justice-y, woke, if you like, kind of thing. It could be. I could see some good things about it. It's a little bit challenging when you're teaching neuroanatomy or statistics and trying to figure out what the Indigenous perspectives are. So in a sense, from another point of view, it's a little bit silly. But is it going to destroy civilization? I mean, and then you have the reality of the matter, which is, look, in situations where it's quite silly, then perhaps the incorporation of Indigenous perspectives in practice might be a little bit superficial. Okay, so is it going to end civilization? Is it something to really, how big a problem, if you consider that to be a problem, is that, compared to other things that are going on, like global warming, for instance?
That's a really good point.
So
there's a thing, and I've been in conversations like this where I have to almost stop myself and be like, oh, why go on about it? Like the thing that you just said, you framed it in a way that was pretty fair. Like, okay, so sometimes you can't really apply it in this sense, and we kind of ask ourselves, should we? And then we move on. But then there's another like sort of framing of, isn't that ridiculous? Like, oh my goodness, like, what do they want us to do? You know, and then like going off, and then you could keep going on and about it. And like I find myself being like, oh my gosh, it's so lame. You know, like I get swept up in it.
So it's very understandable. In fact, I do too. You know, my instinctive reactions to a lot of these hot button issues is exactly the same as yours, Andrea. Like I do get swept up in stuff as well, and then I get tired of being swept up in things, and I end up sounding very calm and everything. But but I think that's just a better place to be than to be.
I think
reacting.
One point that I think is helpful is whenever, you know, maybe people often tacitly acknowledge this, that when you look back at history, right, and I'm not even talking about, you know, if you go back hundreds of years, then you get people like having fist fights in the like Senate and stuff in America, or dueling and stuff. So like it isn't like there hasn't there's like a really good book on all the fights in the early like years of America.
Good.
And
do you know
and,
the
like,
name
the violence
of it?
that used to be on the Senate floor. I think it's Joanna Freeman or something like that.
Didn't some American, sorry to interrupt, but didn't some American politician shoot someone else in the Senate
Probably.
or somewhere like that?
Yeah, it's
like they were shooting each other. It was great.
You thought you had problems, yeah.
It's full of like talks about dueling and, you know, the like, and the amount of alcohol people were consuming and all that kind of thing. But like not even going that far back, just going back to read about like what was happening in the 70s with student protests, with like hijacking of airplanes, and with, you know, the repression of protests in different countries. The Cultural Revolution was still, I think, in swing at that point. And so like this isn't the only era where we've had these like seemingly socially destructive forces, and that involves students and young people having a style of politics which is seen as, you know, beyond the pale. And in many respects, you know, the when it used to be anarchists bombing things, like these were violent ideologies that people implemented. So I feel like, and I'm just as guilty of it, like getting caught up that the contemporary moment is so unusual and so extreme that it feels like there's a sea change. And it isn't like everything's static, you know, Donald Trump is just a normal politician. No, but it is that we have had extreme politics, extreme social division, and we have had always, I think, especially if you're liberal minded, there's always this tension between revolutionaries and more moderate groups, and them kind of debating who's the true left and like what is the real like part of progress. And it often feels like that's a kind of new division with like the rise of the woke or the rise of the social justice, but I'm not so sure it is. I think it's something that's deep in the like left-wing politics, also in right-wing politics, you know, divisions, but left is where I'm more familiar. So and when I look around the UK and the US and Japan are the three places I'm most familiar with for like obvious reasons, but the US has an extremely moderate liberal presidential candidate, like maybe the most moderate candidate imaginable. The UK had a far left prime ministerial candidate who never won an election and has now been replaced by a fairly moderate like liberal politician. So to me the bigger worry is on the right. Like it just objectively, because you have, you know, Trump, you have Boris Johnson, you have like the rise of far right movements across Europe. And yeah, I guess, you know, I have my own political bias because of that. But even if you don't share that, the notion that there's long-term divisions in both sides, I think, is undeniable.
That's a very measured answer, sir. It's always been like this. It was a good answer.
Yeah, well, I
I
grew
know.
up
I
in
yes.
Northern Ireland. Like, yeah, that context kind of matters because I grew up somewhere where there was
Yeah.
regularly bombings and shootings of people based
Oh,
on,
how do you
political
not just
issues.
see
So
this and be
this
like,
notion
guys,
that,
like, this isn't that bad? Then. But
yeah,
you're
it's
not. But you're
that
not
bad
going
compared
around
to
and being like, "I told you so," because this isn't that. Like, you're not acting all pious, like you know better, and that these people are so silly for having their grievances. Like, I could see you, if anyone could, someone from Northern Ireland could be
because
all
of
like
the,
cynical towards that.
yeah,
You guys think you have problems? Try
yeah.
living in Northern Ireland.
I'm just so opposed to identity
Okay.
politics that I refuse to use my personal identity to.
Okay, well,
buttress
good.
my
That's
point.
good.
No, I.
The credit, Chris. It's a
Yeah,
credit
yeah.
to you.
It's just too moral. It's too moral for that. But
You're above that.
I think it's because I feel I'm above that. Although other people generally apply that to me. Like the amount of people on Twitter that are like, "Oh yeah, so you think you're better than me because you studied at Oxford?" Like I didn't mention that. I didn't. I've never said that. But yeah, that the Northern Irish thing feels like it gives me a perspective about the extent of like so when people are talking about that white people never could understand what it's like to be to have like a police force that you don't trust, right? I don't think that applies in a lot of societies. Like, and I'm not just talking about Northern Ireland, but in Northern Ireland in particular, when I was growing up, police force was 95, maybe more, or definitely above 90% Protestant, was seen as completely illegitimate by the Republican Catholic community that I was a part of, and I have a whole litany of personal stories from families and friends about like things that the police did or the army did, and there's since been documented evidence about collusion between the British state forces and unionist paramilitaries. So it's not just all in people's heads, but so like I could bring up those things more, but it feels a little bit like, I don't know, it feels like they're specific to Northern Ireland. And so I am generally against people having totalizing narratives about white people or the Western world, like because often it doesn't fit what I experienced in Northern Ireland. But then I also don't like the notion of I can project Northern Ireland to countries that don't have the same dynamics or the same history. So I don't want to do just the same thing. So like it does inform how I think about things and maybe why I'm not so panicked. But it's, yeah, it isn't something I often think to bring up.
Well, how do you not get swept up? Like you guys were both talking about getting swept up in the reactionary, like, oh, this is ridiculous. Like this, all this, like all, I think that like Dave Rubin's favorite is like this nonsense. Isn't this nonsense? Like that's my best.
Matt, sorry. I just had a visceral reaction.
Did I do that good of an impression?
Citizenship. You just dragged me in to.
Well,
the reactionary
what I
spirit.
mean.
Well, okay, so Chris does get swept up in the hot-blooded Irishman. But,
okay, you don't get to answer, I guess.
They can't control their emotions. We don't know why. It's probably genetic or something. Look, I reckon it's partly a bit of a temperament thing. Like some people really feed off that emotions and it gets them going. And yeah, kind of feels bad, but it also makes them feel good. With me personally, it mainly makes me feel bad. So, and I like feeling good. So but a good practical tip that I think works for anybody is just unfollow and mute the people who, I'm talking about Twitter
in
here.
Person,
just
you're like,
it's the prime
unfollow and mute.
culprit of feeding. Yeah. Wish you could do that in real life. Hey, but yeah, you know what? you know what I mean. Just there are people who do it a lot, people who don't do it a lot, and avoid exposing yourself to bullshit, basically, if you can.
Yeah, I think the pool for dunking or kind of playing to a specific audience that will react positively to you critiquing special people. No one's immune to that. Like, I'm not immune to those forces. I don't think psychologically anybody could be, unless they're, I don't know, unless they're, as mastered of their emotions as Sam Harris has.
We can all just aspire to be that even.
Yes, pure rationality. It is attainable, but for the immortals amongst us,
and you guys call yourself atheists.
Polarization, and like that kind of stuff definitely applies, and you can feel it. Like, I feel like everyone who uses Twitter can feel like there's a pull towards that kind of thing, and it becomes stronger the more that you do it. So I think you have to be like self-aware of the dynamics, like reinforcing dynamics. And the more aware of them you are, it doesn't mean that you don't feel them. It just means that you're maybe you take steps to avoid it, right? Or you see that you're going down that road, and then you think, okay, well, I need to like unfollow these people or do that. And I will say that like my Twitter feed is, I'm pretty, generally happy with it on my main account. But on the Decoding the Gurus account, we only follow the accounts that we talk about, right? So like I add them all. And I log in there, to like send messages or promote things. And that's a horror show. Like the timeline of that, which has the Weinsteins, James Lindsay, and Jordan Peterson. And it's like, I mean, I often go in there and then I get very annoyed because I see, it is like that. Like, I generally don't see James Lindsay's content except when I go into that account, and it's also because it's not just them; it's who they like, who they comment on. So Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, Trump, and it feels like that's a little window into. You could do it on the other side as well. You could do it on like a very far left side or any other part of Twitter. But I can see that if that was what your normal timeline was like, it just feels
visceral reaction.
It would keep you in a state of constant, state of like, here's a new example of the SJWs doing something.
But some people like that. Like, some people are like, ugh, they're on that side. Because it's also like those Democrats and like, oh, the Republicans. Like, it's also political sides as well. And it's so partisan, it feels like, and the Americans.
But don't you feel that
I'm Canadian, by the way, Matt, just to be clear. That's why I'm like, ugh, Americans.
Okay.
That's why I see some milk toast as well. we're all not American, so that's why we're all like, maybe
I'm
it's
actually
okay.
I'm actually a half-seat. I'm a half-seat.
Yeah.
I was once shamed and educated in Canada in a hot tub.
Well, that sounds funsies.
Shamed and educated.
Shamed and educated. Yeah, I was in. I know. I was in.
I live in Calgary. Like, I live next to them. Like, I live right there.
Oh yeah. So that's right then, and it was great.
That's in my neck of the woods.
Anyway, so I was. This is just a funny story. There's no connection to anything. So I was there, and I was in the hot tub, and in a hotel, and there were some ladies in there along with some kids, and we're just making polite conversation. I didn't understand Canadian sports, and then they were talking. I was joking about how ridiculous they were, like curling and stuff like that.
Yeah, they are kind of ridiculous.
I'd seen it on the thing, and so we're talking about that, and the girls were there apparently to compete in a cheerleading competition.
Yeah.
And we don't have cheerleading in Australia. Anyway, so there was this chat about kids talking about sports, and I felt bad because there was a boy sitting there as well, and I thought, I should include him in the conversation. So, what sports do you do? Are you into curling or whatever? No, he was cheerleading as well, right? He was there in the same thing because obviously I was educated. I didn't know at the time. I just assumed it was American, like with pom-poms and stuff, but boys could do it
Boys
too, in case you
can.
didn't know,
Yeah.
guys. And yeah. So I was strongly educated in that hot tub about how wrong it was to assume
Canadians
Gender
can get
assumptions.
upset
Yeah.
over.
Yeah,
Kinda
I immediately apologized profusely for my assumptions, but it was a bit of an awkward hot tub
Ah,
after that.
that's so funny. You're like, I apologize, young
Never-
sir.
I don't recommend an awkward hot tub. It's not a good way.
Oh, that was a
Yeah.
fun little diversion from the culture wars.
Yeah.
But
Cultural relevant. Cultural
right,
relevant,
because men
though.
can be cheerleaders.
Gender
Were you
assumptions.
right?
If
Andrea,
you avoid
don't you think though, like with even Matt's like pleasant diversion into the the hot tub of his past, the ability for people to kind of have a sense of humor and not see everything as like the kind of deepest dark, like the culture war is depressing, but it's also kind of funny. And like I feel like people like Liam, for example, have a very different character than I know. I'm not meaning to pick on James Lindsay specifically because I know you have standing
Yes.
relationship with him, but he doesn't. Whatever you think of his views, he doesn't look like he's having fun.
No, and I don't think he is.
About
He does
any
have fun
topic
with his actual like friends who he only receives notifications
in real life.
for his friends, and those interactions are fun.
Can be.
Yeah, there's a little group of us, and we're
that-
friends with Jim Lindsay.
You said on Twitter recently, like you say LOL
I did.
as a, it
It doesn't
almost
mean that anymore.
meaning-
Yeah, it's like, oh lol,
But
that's amusing.
Yeah. Lol, how ridiculous.
Lol.
Yeah.
It's like, oh lol. Yeah.
I also respond very often with like LOL, but like I'm not cackling at my computer, but I am, however, often finding the responses like kind of ridiculous or kind of make me amused. Like it isn't a lie that I'm finding this
Oh, you might
discussion I'm
kind of
in
mean
funny,
the LOL
or
a bit more than people think. Like, oh, lol. Really? We're
Yeah.
going with that?
or like
Yeah.
since we started the podcast, some people have give feedback, right? That like, oh, Chris doesn't seem
Much of
as
a dick.
as mean or as like that's a nice way of putting it. Doesn't
thought it
seem
was
as mean
mean.
as it
Okay.
seems on Twitter. But for me, I feel the exact same. Like my tone, which often seems to be missed, is that I'm
Tone
like
is not the best
the
to
tone
get across
is the
on
same.
Twitter. Like that's
Yeah, I've noticed this
and being
issue.
like a
but,
hot-blooded Northern Irishman might come across
yeah,
not in the way you mean,
Yeah.
sarcasm-wise.
yeah. I think that's probably why me and Matt get on, because we do see the humor
Okay.
in a lot of the stuff, even if stuff is about serious topics or that kind of thing, and that we have a similar sense about like it would be hard for me to have a conversation with someone that doesn't get sarcasm. That would be difficult, as I've experienced in my life.
Yes.
Several.
And then you kind of like do
What?
you do like break the fourth wall that doesn't exist and be like, okay.
yeah, or just say that was sarcasm.
Yeah. Oh,
That
but
seems
this
an
the
important
best to
thing
ever.
sometimes.
Sarcastic people love having to tell when they're being sarcastic.
Yeah.
It's their favorite. Yeah.
But I'm very glad to see that accounts like Liam's are like insanely
Oh, right,
popular.
you brought him up. Yeah.
Yeah, and insanely popular among people across the wide political spectrum too.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the world needs more of that. Just people
I
not
love
taking
Liam.
things so
He's one of my
seriously.
favorites. I love him. He's just like
Yeah.
he just has such a way of he doesn't take himself too seriously, and that very much comes across in his tweets and Yeah, yeah. I just wish he loved himself a bit more. But yes. I'm very much like happy to see. I made the mistake the other day of. By the other day, I mean like weeks ago. Time doesn't exist in this COVID world. But so I made the catastrophic mistake of accidentally referring to him as moderate left, and he was like,
He doesn't like that.
no, that is not a description of me. No. Like I am actually like pretty far left. And then he like tweeted about it. This is the conversation we were having. And then he tweeted about it and he said people, but I'm like, subtweeting me. I'm sure there were others. But I was like, I said I was sorry, Liam. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I just think reasonable. And like, oh whoops, sorry. I forgot that the far left could be reasonable. Sorry.
Everybody's definition seems relatively subjective in this respect because, like, Iona Italia, who is mutual acquaintances, right? Like, she's convinced I'm uber woke, which like
really?
I don't think is the general consensus, but might be from her perspective. And then on the other hand, there are people who like that we have like people like. Well, Liam is pretty straightforward, but there's other people that are considered like relatively center, or consider themselves centrist. But to me, they seem like pretty hardcore far left people. And there's I don't know. There seems to be a lot of it depends where you're looking, where you see like moderates or extremes. But Liam's politics might be, revolutionary or extreme, but his character is not.
Yes.
At all.
100%. Yeah, and that's one of the things we went over in our letter exchange. He talked about using Stoic principles, applying them to critical theory, and how that is helpful in the long run. So, looking at personal responsibility, which I know the Peterson fans, clean up your damn room. I know they'll like that, but he embodies like that too. And I think that we're not just our one political belief. That's the thing about the simple reductionism that you guys were talking about, how we can't just reduce it, because like, maybe, someone's like a bit of a, say that there's someone who's just like, a little bit like on the socialist side. Some people are like, whoa, so far left, but they're just like, I just want like healthcare for all, I would be like, I was a Bernie Sanders fan, and I would totally vote for him if he made it far enough, which he didn't even have a chance. But I mean, I'm moderate. And I know he's not, but I really think he's got the right idea about a lot of issues.
But Andrea, part of the reason for that is that you're a moderate Canadian.
Yes,
right?
I know. So, and we do have our own. That's what I use the healthcare things. I'm like, very much enjoy having the healthcare. Oh no, sorry, I'm just like out of focus. Oh, there we go. Very back.
Yeah. So I think we got the same problem in Australia too, when sort of, dipping into the online discourse, which is primarily US, which is that, I see myself as very much a moderate as well. But whenever I talk about stuff, it could be environmental stuff, or it could be healthcare or education or just socialisty type things generally. My centrist followers are just outraged.
Right. Yes, you guys. I just talked about how I'm like, oh, I had like 3 pieces of pie for dinner. Smart choice, Andrea. Like that's like those are the things I tweet about now instead of like I found my way on Twitter, and it is talking about like, oh, that's amusing to me that I did that. Or like, what? We all have intrinsic value. Like that's kind of my like if I
maybe you're the guru that we need to do next.
Yeah,
Have you
tell us
noticed
more
Ant
about.
has become very
Well,
spiritual?
you guys,
Yeah,
I actually,
yeah. I mean, can she back that up though? What's the
well, it
rationale for
is,
this
you guys,
spirituality,
it's not
Chris?
a
Can you see it?
secret.
Because I'm not following her
Well, I don't
reasoning
really.
there.
Ugh.
It's like seems completely unsupported.
Okay, I actually like I have a degree in Christian studies with a minor in history, and so I have like a theology background, so I mean it's not out of my.
So
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
Andrea, I know this is your interview, but I had a
Oh
kind of
sure.
question for
Ooh, turning
you,
the tables.
which came up when I was like, yeah, listening to the Jordan Peterson
Peter Nets,
stuff.
that's coming. It's coming soon. Coming in
Okay.
2030.
Oh God, not another Weinstein
Yeah.
thing, but he. So like I mean, I read his book, and I tweeted some stuff about my thoughts about it, and you made some comments as well, which you probably saw. So like the thing that surprised me a little bit about this, like Peterson's position in the culture wars is very much in the anti-SJW, like kind of slightly leaning
Yeah.
conservative, slightly leaning conservative side, but his work is like, you could phrase it as that he's arguing for
Yes.
other ways of knowing outside of science, and that we need to value things beyond rationalism and empiricism, and that I mean, we talked about indigenous perspectives, but you could easily see that like Peterson's view about the knowledge stored in ancient texts, and particularly the Bible, but old religious texts in general, or cultural traditions, is that these are overlooked and important, like
Ancient
stores
wisdom.
of like ancient knowledge. Yeah. So the part I don't get is like how that is okay for people. They're okay with that, but then when it comes to people saying, we need to consider other ways of knowing, or indigenous perspectives, that's beyond appeal. Like, why is one okay, but one's not?
Okay, so he is an interesting fit into the IDW, and I think that he kind of was the main one in the first place, and they all kind of orbited around him because he's like the real guru, When you guys were talking like about the spiritual side, you're like, that's why you waited, because you're like, we wanted to get practice in for the real big kahuna. JBP.
Big kahuna.
Yeah, JBP. So okay. I thought about this when I was listening, because I was really interested in that last episode, because I actually am a JBP fan. Although I did, like, guys, okay, I see there are some faults, because he's human and fallible. Like, I understand that. So, just to be clear, I'm not a true believer fan, just to be clear. But I am a fan. Yep. Nonetheless.
We've got that.
It's okay. We're not judging you at all.
No, I know. I just want to, you okay. Well, I just wanted to get my bases covered, just to know, where I sit with it. Okay, so, but I think that he sort of, you got it correct, actually. I can't remember which one of you it was who said, I think it was Chris, maybe, I don't know which one, said something
definitely
about the, I said you got it right, so you're like, yes, that's me. The psychology being the groundwork for the sort of legitimacy. So it's the psychological meaning of the biblical stories. It's a psychological meaning, which it was, by the way. Like, there are some things, like, I know there are some theological things that I was like, no, it's this. Like, that he said that isn't totally, he didn't do that very often. I actually I didn't really do YouTube comments much before I got in this world. And it's the one time I did a YouTube comment, I'm like, no, this is actually quoting David when Jesus was on the cross. Anyway, so I know, I'm like, you missed it, JBP.
You're a reply guy.
Yes, I was like, oh, well, actually. Then I typed out my, well, actually. Yeah. So, man, I'm way too online. So I can even see, like, the dude, well, actually. Anyway, so the ugly cartoon doing his little thing.
So can we.
Anyway, so, okay, so that's correct, I think. You're on to something with the psychology thing sort of being the foot in the door, okay? The foot in the door for people. But then, I mean, Jordan Peterson, he talks about guys, I've watched all 18 of his biblical lectures. Okay.
Cool.
I've watched all of them. It was all I did this summer of 2017. Okay. I didn't watch TV anymore. I watched him. So
we are the apprentice. You are the master.
No, but okay.
Teach us.
Well, I will. Okay. So here's the thing. He actually was talking about this. He has all this, First Nations art in his house, and he is really good friends, and there's all this controversy surrounding him, like in the Noble Savage situation, but like I think he legitimately is friends with this guy, this wood carver who he's bought all his art from, that is in his house. So regardless of the controversy that has surrounded that friendship, he was talking about this. I think this is the guy. I mean, he could be friends with other First Nations individuals, and I could be getting it wrong, but I think this was the guy he was talking about. And so he was saying how, so this fellow had a dream where his grandparents, visited, or where he when you just, things show up in dreams, you don't have to be visiting, and just, they're there. And he there was something he didn't know, this guy, about a carving technique, and his grandfather told him how to do it, and then that was right, and that was new ways of knowing. And this guy's also, again, I don't want to be saying it incorrectly in case it wasn't this guy, but he was illiterate. He didn't read. And so Peterson's point was like, our ancient ancestors had the kind of minds that they were tapped into, like it was different from those who don't have to remember things, because as soon as we got writing, we didn't have to remember things anymore. So that was the example, and this dream and this guy and getting new information. But I mean, there could be a reason, a psychological reason for gaining new info, even from yourself in a dream. But he just was. You're like, yes, there is. But like,
no.
Okay, but
I just mean you could interpret it.
There's different frames.
Totally.
Yes, there's different framings of it, right? And so I think he would, with the sort of native ways of knowing, I think that he kind of buys into that because of his friendship with this guy, and having someone. So you're not gonna. Okay, we'll see how this goes. Having someone, because I'd listened to that interview, not the whole thing, but I had listened to that interview with him where the guy's like, do you believe that Jesus the Christ rose back from the dead in the flesh? Like, he cornered him, man. Like, I remember that. That was a clip I saw, and he was like, no, not just the legacy. The literal flesh and blood Christ, And so he got him. He got him in a specific, and he got an answer of, I don't know. Someone else asked him about that exact thing during one of the after the biblical lectures that I've seen all of them of. One guy asked him about that. He's like, why didn't you just say probably not? Why did you say I don't know? And this guy was actually a theology student. He said he was. And he's like, because I don't know. Because I don't know. And like, being someone who wants to know things and understand like the world and understand, be in that sort of academic space. Like for me, I just have my undergrad, but I really like being able to speak with people who are in that world. But having someone be a serious, again, he wasn't a guru at the time when I watched this, but having someone actually be like, not Sam Harris like, and like religion is absolutely for idiots. Like, I know that Sam Harris doesn't say it that way, but like Dawkins, the God delusion, mind virus, like having someone actually give you the time of day and be like, maybe, like kind of, and okay, so I guess if it not isn't clear, like I am like a follower of the Christ. Like I am a Christian.
I'm familiar with his work.
Yeah. So I'm a fan of his work. And whatever. So yeah. So anyways, I don't know how you guys will take this, but it's kind of nice to have someone like take you seriously and not just be like, you're a dummy.
Yeah.
You're an archaic dummy. Anyway. Yeah.
No, I get that. I think that's a good point. And you know, I think the sort of the snarky atheist who goes around pissing on stuff
Yeah.
is pretty good trope. It's a pretty good trope by now, and he's a dick. And,
Yeah.
and
Well,
so
did I answer it? Did I answer? I don't know if I answered the question. I just kind of made it more personal and like what I felt about it.
No, but
oh no, you touched on a few. You touched on a few things. I'll answer if that's okay.
Yeah,
'cause
yeah.
I think it's interesting. Yeah. So look, I mean, I got some sympathy for that. Like on one hand, yes, it's clearly not his main interest, like the literal truths, literal rising from the dead and
Yeah.
stuff like that. He's interested in psychological and metaphors
Yes,
and archetypes
totally,
and so on.
yeah.
On the other hand, it's also like at other times he really does talk like when he asks, you know, is Christ still living? Well, yes, he's living, and he's very definitive
yes.
about Christ being alive, but avoids the question of whether literally alive again, and redefines being alive in terms of being remembered and talked about and having significance in people's lives.
Right.
Which, so being
It depends on what you mean by true. It's true. Like, it's true that he does have significance in people's lives. And then that's when he brings up, like, so it depends on what you mean by true, that he truly does have significance in people's lives. So, because you can see evidence of that, you see? Like, he'd go on about it.
I think I don't have any issue with somebody being like sort of wishy-washy about their personal view of the relationship with God,
right.
or that kind of thing. My issue is like the way, in his case specifically, that he kind of uses both simultaneously. So
okay,
if he was to say that, like, just expressly say, look, yeah, I'm agnostic about whether Jesus rose from the dead physically, but I think his legacy is real no matter what. I don't know about the spiritual reality of that. That's like a 2-second answer, right? But if you ask, whenever he's asked about that, he says it requires 18 hours to unpack, and I feel like then that's just deflecting, because you should be able to just core state whether or not it's a legitimate question the person's asking, or whether you think it doesn't get to the important issues. There's a separate point from, do you think a man rose from the dead? Because that's an important question for Christians. And if the answer is no, that means something about your views about materialism and religion. If you say, I don't know, it's something. And if you say, yes, it means something different. I think like any of those answers okay. And he did answer, I don't know. But then at other points in the exact same talk, he's asked directly, so do you think it's is there something more than metaphorical about it? And he's like, yes, definitely.
I can hear him say it.
But then he goes into a long
definitely, yes,
metaphorical answer.
Yeah, he's very vehement, very clear about the yes, but then the explanation behind the yes.
And then saying evolutionists cannot be materialists because of selection, right? And you're kind of like, well, only if they accept your
okay. Well, that's because he does
selection.
And this is why a lot of religious folks do like him, and some even are calling themselves Christian atheists. Like this is why people who want to be spiritual without committing, like people like him because he's like that, and like because he's also like, I don't think he knows. I think he's working it out. Like he says, I'm just talking. Actually, I was talking about it with my husband yesterday, and he was like, because we went and saw him when he came to our city, and he's like, yeah, he said that. I'm just working this out loud here, guys. Like,
Yeah, look. Yeah. Sorry, I think you're right in that I can see the appeal among modern Christians, because then I think he forms part of that broader trend. We sort of hinted at it before with the secular gurus, when we're talking about that. I think the traditional forms of religiosity and spirituality, which is sort of downright, like really kind of rejects science and rejects materialism and stuff like that, is increasingly less popular, and so the literalist Christian type approach is, I think, also becoming less popular. It's taken longer in the place in North America than in the rest of the world, but it seems the beginnings seem to be happening there too. So there's like a long term, in terms of like 200 years long term shift towards abstractifying religious and spiritual belief and turning it into, so it occupies this kind of intersection of philosophy and psychology and a very abstract metaphysics. And I think you're right. I can understand how JBP occupies.
Yeah, and the abstraction is what, because the people who are attracted to that, they like that. Like the things that you don't like, Chris, and probably that you I don't know, you probably get annoyed with too. They're mad, but like the inconsistencies are not considered inconsistencies because we're talking up here.
Abstract. Yeah, but I think part of my issue is that, like, were it to stay in that sphere, I'm kind of okay with that. That, like, it's not my thing, but it's okay. But when you
come down here for a little breath of regular Earth air, then go up into the clouds.
Yeah, or you start saying, like, I've read 200 books on climate change, and so I think I apply the same rigorous standards to that as I do to these other issues. And the people that respect you because of your knowledge of, like linking Bible stories to psychological constructs and stuff, heed what you're saying about climate change. And if the good professor has doubts, then, and that's the part that I consider, like, that you can't completely divorce that, because once you get like a kind of guru
attitude,
you can use that.
Yeah, what would JBP do? Yeah.
And he did do that, and in my view, irresponsibly, about topics that he doesn't know as well. And, like, I mean, the 200 books thing sounds stupid, right? Because, like, if someone says to you, I've read 200 books on the topic, it's like, it's a silly brag, because nobody has read 200 books on it. I don't think Liam has read 200 books on a specific topic, but it's also not the way people get, knowledge or whatever. But it's not a throwaway claim when it comes to like Jordan Peterson, because he'll repeat that in different circumstances, and then he will use that to kind of say, look, I'm not unserious about this. I've done the research and blah blah blah. And I get that sometimes he will say, like when he was talking about the images of helixes being in ancient art, right? And this potentially being a representation of DNA. He does flag that up by saying, look, I'm going out on a limb. I'm not saying I 100% believe this, but it's speculative. But it's kind of the point that me and Matt raised in, like, one of the episodes, and especially with the Weinsteins, that people issue disclaimers every so often. Like, especially, I mean, the Weinsteins do it, James Lindsay does it, everyone does it. To issue a disclaimer takes very little time to say, like, I don't know about this topic. But if you talk for 3 hours about something and then you issue a 2-minute disclaimer, what people get is 3 hours of you, strongly insisting your opinion. And then there's like the little bit at the end. And when you criticize them, they say, well, look, at the end, he said he's not sure. But it's like, yeah, but for 3 hours, he was pretty damn sure.
Pretty darn sure.
I think that's what people remember.
So maybe they should give disclaimers every 10 minutes. But that, okay, well, and then maybe you should rethink what you're doing. Well, okay. I do agree with that, because I do think that with the inconsistencies, like the postmodernism, I do think that Jordan Peterson has quite a brand of postmodernism that he doesn't see. I do think that he gets annoyed at the materialists. Actually, I don't know if it's, he gets annoyed at the wanting the objective view, but then he kind of he weaves his archetypes in the natural world, which is actually really awesome, and I really like that, because that was, like, I had been on a little bit of a journey since university anyway, since I took a geology class, but he helped me make the last final jump to be like, okay, it's evolution, man. Like, it's gotta be. Like, he did. He helped me
That's true.
get like in his biblical series of all things. It was the biblical series that made me. What?
That makes that makes me like him. That makes me like him an awful lot more to know he's converting people. So
and I think it's completely true that people don't give enough credit to the side that, you know, there isn't just a radicalization pipeline. There is also this kind of my broader point, which I'm kind of saying it tongue in cheek, but that Jordan Peterson's respect for indigenous knowledge and potential other ways of knowing beyond scientific understanding could be a point of agreement or a reaching across the aisles moment with like the social justicey people, right? Who are critiquing science for different reasons, but they're also critiquing like this overly empirical reductionist scientific framework. But I see so little of that happen that it's surprising that if you're as an interesting figure, I don't mean you, Andrea.
Yeah.
This is why my critique is maybe slightly more focused at his followers than at him. You do have an issue with like, you know, the reductionist rationalist worldview. Then maybe you can understand the perspective of those that are critiquing silence. Like, I don't have that worldview, but I don't at the same time kind of have the same sympathy for the spiritual components of like Jordan Peterson's message. So,
right. And that's the thing, he wouldn't have gotten as big as he did if it wasn't for those political views.
Yeah.
Because if he didn't have, okay, so hypothetically, I'd be taking away the thing that put him on the map, but we'll pretend like it still works. If you took away those and he's just stuck with his lectures, man, he was set up to go big. Like the fact that he had all these lectures already at the ready for people to look up. So I thought about that when you guys were talking about his rise. Anyway, but if we took away that political space that he entered and just stuck in with the more interesting parts of him that was why I like him, the archetypal sort of Jungian, the mythologist, if you will. Yeah. Like if that was the person who rose to fame and notoriety and whatnot, I think that it could have. If he didn't quite have such a disdain for postmodern neo-Marxism, like if because he doesn't see it. That's the thing that you guys brought up that I agree with, that he doesn't see that he has. I don't think I'm against postmodernism as much as I thought I was.
Yeah.
You know, because he's similar to that. He's like, well, okay, let's. The Enlightenment
if someone is interviewing you and asking you to clarify how your perspective is different from a postmodernist, and it requires like a detailed, you know, kind of parsing of what the difference is. There is parallels that need to be navigated. Like, so it's, I don't know. Like, I think I completely agree that like to some extent, he's a very different character than like a Dave Rubin or a Bridget Fetisi, or even like just somebody steeped in culture war, steeped in political stuff. I completely agree that there's a reason he had appeal beyond that and the kind of deeper well than that. And so, like I get why people would be interested in his stuff and wouldn't be the same way for like Dave Rubin. But I think it's an unfortunate overlap that a lot of, you know, like Dave Rubin was opening for Peterson.
Yeah, I know, I saw him. I met him. Yeah.
Or like, it's an obvious match on the one hand if you view him as a culture war figure, but if you view him the way that you're presenting, then like, what the hell is Dave Rubin doing? I know.
Right? Like the biblical series was every time it was filmed, it was packed. And the line of questions went down, and like you guys did kind of like joke about this, and I think he's even kind of like taken aback by, he's like, if you told me that like these biblical lectures would just pack the house out, I would have said you were a liar or like ridiculous. Like he's like, I wouldn't have believed it. And I wouldn't have believed it. Yet it happened. How did it happen, guys? And that's the guru-esque part of him that I think drew people.
Yeah.
But it's also that meaning thing. And that's one of the things that he brought to the intellectual dark web space that the other sort of just straight out scientist guys didn't bring, because we already know the new atheist method. Like, we knew that. We've heard it, you know? But Peterson brought this sort of just, I'm gonna say just spirituality, man. Well, it depends. Like, do you know how many times I say, well, it depends on what you mean by God. It depends on what you mean by truth. You know what I mean? Like, and that's a postmodern thing. That's the thing. The language, the semantics of language is so postmodern. But I get why he doesn't love them. I know the parts of it he's talking about. But sometimes, like when you were talking about people talking past each other, that is a situation where, well, it depends on what you mean by actually does matter when people are talking past each other.
It can help.
Yeah. So I think that, and with him gone and out of commission, I think that that's kind of why it fell apart, because people are like, yeah, you're just like, who all think you need Nobels. Anyway.
Yeah.
But there was a hope. There was an intrinsic value of like each person. So I'm going over on my little Twitter spiel. Like there was like a hope, I would say, even though he's a very depressing character, Peterson. That someone was saying that they're like, wow, he's very depressive. But he just wants to find something to, I don't know, like aim. Like life is suffering, so aim for something. Anyway.
Yeah, I think the suffering does resonate with him personally. Although, I mean, that's one of the things about Jordan Peterson is that, I mean, as far as I understand him, you know more than me, both of you, I think, but he's not unusual. Like, he's not out of step at all with like there are philosophers who have pretty much his approach to kind of science and truth and stuff like that. Yeah. Like it's not. He doesn't strike. I don't mean to be dismissive of him. It's not meant to be like a sort of a sly dig, but I don't think he's very innovative, because I've seen pretty much those ideas elsewhere in different places.
But he presents it with a sort of guru-esque gravitas.
Yeah, he presents it well, and so that genuinely isn't a dig, because there's nothing really new under the sun.
Right.
Anyway,
When he would agree with that.
But for instance. And but like I can't remember if I said this in the episode, or Chris probably cut it out because he always cuts out all my good bits. But because I'm just there to make him look good. That's the idea.
I have hours and hours of Matt making jokes, and they're just gone.
Gone. All the funny ones, anyway.
Okay.
But all but one of the things I mean, the thing that struck me when listening to Jordan Peterson is how similar it was to. I've got some personal contact with people who are into Christian Catholic spiritual philosophy, highly abstract sort of stuff, and how it's connected to social justice and all of this. And I was baffled by this at first, but you know, in Australia, there's a long history of the Catholic Church being like sort of right on and really into kind of social justice and social welfare and good sort of stuff. I don't know to what degree that's true elsewhere in the world, but it's a very
I totally know about that. Yeah, theology on the margins. That's a class I had to take. Yeah.
So that's really popular among sort of left-wing Christians in Australia, and with some people I know in my family, and they've got bookshelves just full of that stuff. And it is this very abstract philosophical. And it's religious and spiritual, but it's at this kind of it's
but it's funny because Peterson would be against that, because of that's on like that social justice left, that he's like you will not compel me to compel my speech. But so I don't think he jives with the liberation theology, but he does have that like liberation-esque, or sorry, the spirituality-esque feel. He just isn't on that side of the spectrum spirituality-wise, but he is up there in the same space. Is that would that be fair?
Yeah, same. same sort of view of the world,
Yeah.
really, which is and I think it's the same. There's nothing bad or good about it. It's like you were hinting at this before in terms of it's like I think you were saying essentially the good thing about JBP in the IDW is that he brought in that kind of, so it's not just dry scientific rationalism, but here's the stuff. Here's what's meaningful. Here's how I should live my life. Here's what's important. That's something, like, I get it. Like I get why people go to the theaters and want to listen to it, and I get the appeal. But I think the thing about it that I just have to draw the line, and Chris sort of mentioned this before, is that it's when you conflate that with, like, I'm fine with that in its own sphere,
when you know what you're dealing with, when it's predictable.
Yeah, but when it crosses over into, okay, you can't understand evolution without appreciating this stuff, or you can't understand, and he sort of blurs the lines between, oh no, I can't answer a question about whether Christ is living or dead, because actually when we talk about living, we mean, you know what I mean? Like, then you're conflating the material world with
I know, but I'm
stuff.
just like, but that's how I decided evolution was factual, was from that.
I know.
The outcome can be good.
You're like, it's
but
some good game, but...
To give an example, there's a academic collaborator I have who's a Catholic. Oh no, he's not a Catholic priest. Oh, I shouldn't say. He's a Church of England priest. But
they broke away a while ago.
He's a priest, right? Like he does priest stuff and says masses and all those kind of things. But it's not in his work. Like, I work with him. I do research with him, and he studies religion. But he doesn't approach it. He doesn't approach his research in the way that he approaches his ministry. Okay. The two things are, like, distinct.
Interesting.
And he can use the experiences in one to inform the other, but he doesn't use the approach. He doesn't, like, muddy the lines between those two identities. And I know other researchers who've muddied that they are Christians and believers, and that this comes into their work. And, like, I'm not saying that's in Jordan Peterson's work, because I don't know his research work well enough. But I will say in his popular presentation of psychology and science, it's muddied in.
Yeah.
Both. It feels like it's all like a mix. I don't know his empirical work, so can't say that. But that's the issue for me, where you're like that and the fact that we're talking about, why would his thing be unique? Like when Matt says there's tons of other stuff like that. But I think, like you said, Andrea, the protests, the culture war stuff, that's what got him noticed. And that it wasn't like he gave up talking about that stuff, right? That was still a big part of it. And like that, I think it's hard in this moment to ignore that ends up often being what is the hook for people. Like, where are you on some culture war? What's your view on trans?
I get what you're saying about the critique. Stick to what you know. And it's not just JBP. It's anyone who becomes famous for any topic that they're an expert on, then giving their opinion. Like Taylor Swift's silence on this is deafening. Like, that's that, people joke about that, right? But I actually am like, that's smart of her. Like, I think that there were other reasons why she wasn't sharing opinions, because of her little, like, everyone should love me image. Okay, you could have other reasons. They might not be all as, like, noble as this, but don't talk about things you aren't an expert about when you have a following. Like, that's kind of what it sounds like.
100.
You guys are saying?
I wish I could get a tattoo of that on, like, my forehead. They're gonna end up like the guy in Memento with just things tattooed.
You're taking points from this talk and just are like, I'm gonna permanently put this places because it's so good.
Yeah, but it like that's something I often feel, and like, there's people that we haven't talked about that we will talk about, like Nicholas Taleb and and I feel this applies completely. This is a bipartisan. This is just a sense that, like, in all cases, people, experts speaking outside their field is a threat, right? Or it should come with, like, a big warning sign, or at very least they should begin it by saying, "This is not my field of expertise. I'm not sure. This is just an opinion, and that won't save them anyway.
But then
if they
3
say it,
hours
but at least it
later,
would
you.
help. Well, yeah. So this is if they're giving a soundbite answer. I'll accept that.
Okay.
But the other thing is that there is a way that people can talk about their specialist issue. They can be like you can be an expert in an area without needing to be a guru.
Wait.
And I suspect
but everyone wants to be a
in
guru
some-
though, because then you get lots of followers on Twitter, and then woohoo.
But this is, I mean, we haven't
cha-ching.
watched it. Yeah. But when we looked for, Kendi's content, for example, first of all, there's much less of it on YouTube and in these viral clips or whatever. And it looks like academic style talks. When you look at his content, mostly it's some lecture about critical race theory or that kind of thing. But it's at an academic thing. It doesn't have tons and tons of views. And then the little bits that we've watched have been, sort of academic-y in tone or about a specific topic. So I'm not sure because I haven't spent a ton of time looking at these people's content, but I think there's different brands and different streams, right? And it may be that the intellectual dark web or right-wing kind of punditry is particularly at this cultural moment good at producing gurus or giving them a space, or the heterodox area. Yeah, that's just a working hypothesis that needs more evidence on either side of the ledger. There might, I mean, I know that there are crazy left-wing conspiracy theorists and in tanky Twitter and in the kind of alternative health sphere.
Right.
But I'm talking about social justice versus anti-social justice. I'm not saying there's nothing that is extreme there, but it's very different from somebody having a bunch of lectures online, a podcast series, an active Twitter presence. I mean, maybe the side that's closer to that is the left-wing political podcast.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
Chapo
okay, so I never thought about what you're describing about the incongruencies between the anti social justice left and then the social justice left, and how they're very different. They go about things very differently in regards to marketing themselves.
Yeah, online.
Or grouping together.
How many clips are there of D'Angelo destroys
right.
And I think there's another aspect of this too, which is that I think there's something in general left-wing thought which kind of resists the development of gurus, because I think left-wing people tend to be more keen to cut people down. With that, it's they talk about cancel culture, and the big cancel always finds himself cancelled, So
you don't want to get too big.
There's this inherent Yeah, if you get too big, they will cut you down. And, already you can see with Robert D'Angelo, there's a lot of on the hard left that don't like her and are kind of gunning for her. And
when you look at how much he makes per talk, it's like, whoa. You're just another white lady, getting paid.
Yeah. But even, I think so. I think it's a bit of a general rule that we're seeing, which is that on the right, there's more attraction to cults of personality in general than how the left looks now, anyway, in the West.
Send your emails to Matt.
I'm realizing
your partisan emails.
What kind of emails do you think you'll be getting?
It's just I think Matt's right, because I used to take the example, I used to give the example very often that Chomsky was kind of treated as a saint almost, that people would just quote me when they were arguing, well, Chomsky said this. So for me, Chomsky was always an interesting person, but whatever he said, I was not bound to the word of Chomsky. Right. But people would quote it to me and say, well, Chomsky said that, so what do you think about that? And I disagree with him, but
you can't.
very, very recently, I think just the past few days, in the very online space, he's got in trouble because he was speaking to people on the podcast, and he basically argued that people should vote for Biden because it's unrealistic to expect a revolution of capitalism in the next 20 years, but climate change policies are very important. And he's getting either torn down as, you know, oh, he's like past it, or the like IDW inclined people are kind of liking him a little bit because he's, you
I
know,
think I
been
saw that,
helping
and the
them.
girl tweeted it out and was like, "We had an argument and I won," and it was like,
Yeah, it's a silly
okay.
thing, but like as an example, he's now gone for me as what Matt said about, you know, that you live to see them tore down
Right.
on the
Oh,
left.
I see. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, they get.
Yeah, he's in the process, I think,
Yeah.
of being tore down. The like Cambodian genocide denial didn't do it, but like disagreeing about like
The Cambodian genocide denial didn't do it.
it was yeah.
Oh wow. Well, you know, you never can tell what'll do it. What'll get you canceled.
Yeah.
Guys, I think it's been 2 hours and 18 minutes, so I think
This is a common
feel-
problem with us.
think this is a good place to end.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's Chris's fault. This.
we'll just blame the Irishman. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, I think it's your responsibility to
You're
end
right,
it
it's
properly
my-
because as we've
you
established, I
can't.
can't
Yeah.
do
Bye. Okay, no. I tried to do a less feminized version. Okay, but like I might have to cut the hot tub story. We'll see. Okay, so I would like to thank you, fellas, for coming on my show.
Cool.
Pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks. Mm.
Oh, I'm actually, you know
Yeah.
what? Guys, I'm the worst at goodbyes as well, so don't feel bad, Chris.
Okay.
I'm bad at them too.
Bye
I think we
bye.
should. That's what we want. That's what I was waiting for.
Bye-bye.